So we know that Gen Z has terrible mental health, much worse than the millennials before them. And when you don't have a sense of shared norms, when there's no moral matrix, people are lost. Yeah. They're not free. It's like, hey, I can do whatever I want. They are disoriented. They can't find any sense of meaning.
NPO Radio 1, EO.
De Ongelooflijke Podcast.
Hey, goed dat je kijkt naar de Ongelooflijke Podcast. Thanks for watching de Ongelooflijke Podcast. De interview is in English, but de intro is in Dutch. Ja, een bijzondere bonusaflevering met misschien wel een van de meest belangrijke denkers van dit moment, sociaal-psycholoog Jonathan Haidt.
This book is doing something that you actually don't see often these days. It's causing a real shift in public opinion and even policies.
Dit boek staat op nummer 1 in de bestsellerlijst van de New York Times, The Anxious Generation.
Hij is sociaal-psycholoog, hoogleraar en de meest vooraanstaande onderzoeker op dit gebied.
Jonathan, I see people walking all over Brooklyn holding this book.
The subtitle says it all.
How the great rewiring of childhood
is causing an epidemic of mental illness.
You're here because you're a very big admirer of Jonathan's work.
Yes.
How influential is he in the world?
Extremely.
Ja, wat een impact kan je zeggen. Met natuurlijk als grote punt maken social media en smartphones ons mentaal en geestelijk kapot. Volgens Haidt is dit ons laatste jaar om de problemen aan te pakken. Zeker met AI-opkomst. Maar hoe? Dat ga ik vragen. En Haidt is ook iemand die breed nadenkt, ook over de staat van de democratie. Dat is natuurlijk wel saillant nu, met wat er in Amerika gebeurt. Maar hij denkt ook veel na over de rol van religie, wat interessant is, want hij is zelf atheïst. Ik spreek hem uiteraard samen met vaste gast van de Ongelooflijke, theoloog Stefan Paas. Hij is hoogleraar aan de VU in Amsterdam en de Theologische Universiteit Utrecht. Jonathan Haidt. Welkom in de Ongelooflijke Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you with us. But we actually have no time to waste, because I heard you say that this is maybe our last year to fix the mess we're in when it comes to smartphones, when it comes to social media. Why is the urgency so high right now?
Well, the urgency is so high because AI is coming in, and we all know that AI is going to be coming in at an exponential pace, faster than any other technology. And right now, AI is not deeply entangled with society. It's not deeply entangled with childhood. Kids are using ChatGPT, but they're kind of using it the way we used to use Google, only it's better. But
to write fun stories.
Yeah, that's right, and to do their homework. So there are issues, there are education issues with it, but it's at the level that social media was at 10 or 15 years ago, or 15, 20 years ago, like not fully entangled. But whenever you have a situation where the people who know the most about a topic are the most alarmed, you should be very alarmed.
Right.
And the experts in AI are debating what are the odds that AI wipes out humanity? What are the odds that AI either it becomes a kind of consciousness and it decides to wipe us out? That's the science fiction version, which who knows? That may or may not come true in the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years. Who knows? But what I'm most concerned about is that we've already seen an incredible erosion of our ability to know anything. We can find information better than ever, but the possibility of having shared facts is already shredded in the United States. No matter what happens, no matter what the president does, we will not agree on what it was or what the import of it was or what the basic facts are. So we're already there just from social media. AI is going to make that exponentially worse. So within a year or two, it will be very possible, it might be difficult to really do anything.
So that's even a sort of added concern even after your book was published, right? The Anxious Generation, because I can't remember, there was a lot of AI in that.
ChatGPT came out in November of 2022.
Right.
And I wrote most of the book in 2022 and 2023.
Yeah.
And so we were just beginning to see it. But since the book came out, we've all learned a lot more.
Yeah.
And the main concern I have is not so much the science fiction scenario where it becomes conscious and kills us. It's just that AI will allow everyone to do anything they want. It'll super empower everybody, including every terrorist, every kid who wants to, in America, we occasionally, and in Europe, you occasionally have a young man who tries to kill as many people as he can.
Yeah.
So AI will super empower people to hurt other people.
But also, it takes no effort anymore to really produce something.
That's right.
And that also adds to the fact in your book, The Anxious Generation, that you say the youth, especially young people, they're going to have lots of problems on many levels, but also when it comes to attention.
Yeah, that's right.
And it doesn't take any effort anymore to produce something of worth.
That's right.
Because of AI.
That's right. And that's a really good way of saying it. It doesn't take any effort. Effort is really key here, because technology always makes things easier.
Yeah.
It's incredible that, it used to be, I remember when the first calculators were invented in the 1970s, like, wow, you can multiply big numbers like instantly. You don't even have to think. That was amazing. Okay, and technology always makes things easier. And for adults, we have projects and jobs and things we're trying to do, and the technology makes it easy, and that's great. But children need to do hard things. Children need to learn to do addition. They need to learn how to look something up. They need to learn how to ask people for help.
We made an episode about your book, The Action Generation, I think more than a year ago. Maybe people didn't listen to that or didn't read your book. Can you take us back a little? What's the biggest concern, even apart from AI? What's the reason why smartphones and social media are harming our children, most of all?
So what launched me on this was that I'm a college professor. I teach at New York University. And the students who were coming in around 2014, 2015 were just really different from anything we'd seen before. Yeah. They were very anxious, fragile, easily offended. We couldn't understand it. And so that led me and my friend Greg Lukianoff to write a book called The Coddling of the American Mind. Because at least in the United States, we vastly overprotect our children. And I hope we'll talk about this, the difference between Holland, where you still let kids run around and ride bicycles.
To some extent, yeah.
Okay. And we'll talk about whether it's declining. I don't know yet. But in the United States, we vastly overprotected our children. Beginning in the 90s, we stopped letting children outside. We thought they'll be kidnapped if we ever let them out of our sight. And so in that book, Greg and I traced out how this increasing overprotection deprived children of the ability to do hard things and have adventures and take risks. So that's a piece of the story. And that was distinctively American, although, we discovered it's actually the exact same in all the English-speaking countries. So even though Britain and Canada and Australia don't have the crime that America had in the 70s and 80s, they too overprotected our kids. So that's where I was by 2017, 2018, was something weird is happening among kids in the English-speaking countries because they're overprotected, and that's a piece of the story. But we didn't know whether social media was a cause. At the time, there wasn't much evidence. And so you asked me, what's the big thing? So there's really two big things that have happened. One is the international collapse of teen mental health, which is more visible in girls, but it's true for boys too. When you graph out the trends in mental health all over the Western world, you see no real trend from the late 90s through about 2010, even 2011. There's no sign of any problem. There are fluctuations in different countries, but there's no real trend. Then all of a sudden, 2012, 2013, the curves just shoot upwards, especially for girls. It's a very sharp
Girls of what age?
Teenagers.
Teenage, okay.
So adolescence. This whole the central focus here is adolescence, because that's when the brain is rewiring itself very, very rapidly into the adult form.
So children born in the late 90s, around 2000. Okay.
That's right. So Gen Z begins with birth year 1996 or 1997, depending how you count it. And we don't know when it ends. They say 2010, 2011. Right. So let's just go with that. 1996 through 2010, those kids are Gen Z. The kids after that are Gen Alpha.
All right.
So we know that Gen Z has terrible mental health, much worse than the millennials before them. And so that's the first thing, is the mental health. And that's what I focused on in the book, because that's where we had the most evidence. And I've been working with that evidence since 2015. I've been gathering that evidence. So that's what I focused on. But by the time we finished the book, we realized, there's a lot more than mental health damage. There's the fragmentation of attention. And so we wrote about that somewhat in the book. But only in the last year, since the book came out, are we getting data in that shows that this is a vastly international decline in education. Kids know less than they did in 2012. They're doing worse on math. They're having more trouble reading a passage and saying what it means. This all started in 2012. This did not start with COVID. And I'm coming to see that the destruction of the human ability to pay attention or read a book is probably going to be much bigger than the massive damage to mental health of 20 or 30% of young people.
Why is that going to be bigger?
Because imagine humanity going forward into a very difficult time. Human culture has always been transmitted vertically. We get it from our elders who learned lessons. We read the ancient Greeks or Shakespeare because there are lessons in our culture, and the best things that have ever been thought, the most useful things, come down to us. So I learned this when writing my book, The Happiness Hypothesis. The ancients were not smarter than we are. We probably have higher IQs because we're better nutrition, better health. Oh. But what comes down to us is only the wisdom that generation after generation thought was useful. So culture comes down vertically. And this is why religion is so important. Religion is the greatest repository of ancient wisdom. There are secular philosophical traditions like Stoicism, but religion is the main way that things have come down to us. Now imagine that was true until 2012. But then once 2012 is the magical year when kids are largely trading in their flip phones, their basic phones, they're getting smartphones. And those smartphones have a front-facing camera, which came out in 2010. And those smartphones have Instagram, which is the first social media platform that was designed for smartphones. Right. And in 2012 is when Facebook buys Instagram. All the girls, there's a lot of publicity, all the girls go onto Instagram. Yeah. So 2012 is the magical year when kids are now connected to millions of other people all the time, getting interrupted all the time. And my argument, this is a new argument, this is like only the second time I'm saying it.
All right.
But my argument is that human culture has always been transmitted vertically until around 2012. And now for young people, it's transmitted horizontally. That is, half of our kids say they're online almost all the time, almost constantly, which means they have so much information coming in. It's trivia, it's ephemera, it's garbage that has no lasting value, and there's millions of pieces of it flooding in, which means there's no room. There's no room in the input stream to read books, to learn anything from previous generations.
Intuitively, I would say, just to push back a little, I mean, I can follow this completely, but there's also some good stuff there.
Oh, really?
But probably
like what? Tell me. Let's go through it.
Well, I guess on the internet, social media.
Wait, the internet, great. The internet's great. But tell me the good stuff about social media.
I'm not on Instagram. I should say that. But more theoretically, I suppose you need a sort of compass, sort of inner knowledge, basic knowledge to navigate anyway, to find what's valuable out there. And maybe that's the problem. If we don't have roots anymore, we just are shoppers on the internet, consumers, and
you're just buying little bits of candy.
Even if there is something good there, as some might say, how to find it, how to evaluate what's good and what's not, how to assess things. I suppose that's a big problem there.
That's right. So I really want to distinguish between the internet and social media.
Yeah.
So this is a very important, this is when people say, oh, there's pluses and minuses, oh, there's good and bad.
That's what a lot of people say.
Right, they say that. But the good is always about the internet. They say, oh, it connects people. Social media connects people. Yes, the internet did, and FaceTime and Skype and Zoom and texting and call.
But maybe social media, it's the name says social, it's easier to connect with like-minded people. And when you're somewhere, when you're one of the few Muslims or Christians or transgender
or whatever,
you can find like-minded people when you're lonely.
That's right.
That's
and the internet did that in the 90s. So let's go back to the 90s. And this is why we all made such mistakes about social media, because in the 90s, so I guess I'm guessing from your hair color that you're at least old enough, I don't know about you, to remember when the internet came in. Do you remember the first time you saw a web browser?
Yes, I think I do, yeah.
Okay, and was it like incredible, or was it just like, oh, this is interesting?
Well, I remember that. I especially found Google a very nice thing to work with.
Yeah.
But again, because you know already things, you know what to find and what to look for and how to assess information and all that.
Google was amazing.
Yeah.
So the point I want to convey is that the personal computer comes out really around 1980 or so. Is the PC, the IBM PC, and before that was the Apple. And they weren't that interesting, and it was growing slowly, and you could do word processing. And then you get the internet, and the early internet was like Gopher. It was hard to use. It was kind of cool. And then you get web browsers. And it's magic. You just type in, anything you want to know. And boom, it comes up within 1 second. And so to me, it was as if God came down to us and said to humanity, do you want omniscience? Do you want to know everything instantly? And the catch is that everyone else is going to have it too.
Yeah.
Okay, and most of us would have said, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
And we did, and it was amazing. And the internet allowed people to communicate, connect, find information, put up websites. So LGBTQ kids who are in rural areas, they can't find anyone before that. Now they can. There's all kinds of ways to connect with the internet. And this is the 1990s. We think democracy is triumphant, communism has failed, dictatorships, good luck, China. Keeping out the internet, you'll never do it.
I remember Bill Clinton saying something like that, right?
That's right. So my point is, we were techno-optimists. We thought the internet was going to revolutionize. It was going to be the best friend of democracy. It was going to be the best friend of isolated, marginalized kids. It was going to to be amazing, and it was.
We're all going to learn so much.
That's right, and we did.
Big tech guys were still Democrats.
That's right. That's right. Some of them were still dropping out of college at the time. But so my point is, we start off super optimistic, okay? And then we get, in 2003, we get the first modern social media companies. At first, it's Friendster, MySpace, and Facebook. It's around 2003. And this also seems amazing. It's like it's easier to connect because back then, there was no news feed. It was just, here's my page, I'm putting up photos. Oh, I can go to your page, look at your photos. Okay, so that's fine. Humans have always wanted to connect. The early internet did that.
Right.
Early social media did that. And so we're all techno-optimists. And then we get the smartphone in 2007, and it's an amazing device. You know, when I was a kid, I watched Star Trek. And, when will we have communicators? Like you can just flip it open. And well, I guess those were cell phones. But so the iPhone is amazing. And again, it makes everything easy. Do you want to hail a taxi? Press a button. The car will come pick you up. I mean, it was mind-blowing.
You don't have to look where you're going. You can just use Google Maps.
Right. So it's all amazing. And what we didn't notice was that it begins to get sinister in 2009. And the reason why is because the early internet was a free, open place for exploration. And in 2009, we get the like button and the retweet button. And so now social media becomes super viral. I can't remember what year the newsfeed comes in. But the newsfeed originally was just, here's your friend's new photographs. Here's what your friend just said. So originally the newsfeed seemed to be about relationships. But gradually it becomes more about the news. And it becomes more about, can you believe what President so-and-so said? Oh, these bastards over here. So it becomes much angrier.
I see.
And that's when it gets super viral. So I mean, the idea, it's one thing if, with email, like if you send me some email that makes me angry, I can send it to like 20 people by email. But with the retweet button now, instantly I can reach, suppose I have 500 followers and you have 10,000. Boom, boom, boom. Before you know it, millions and millions of people. So it really changes in 2009.
The like button does something with, as you write in the book, with girls, especially when it comes to getting likes for selfies and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
comparing.
Generally,
themselves.
I mean, it's a bit stereotypical, but the boys are gaming and the girls are on social media.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Because if you think about, so this is when we get the birth of the attention economy, and the like button is the currency of the attention economy. It shows, yes, someone liked what I said. Follower counts, like counts, retweet counts, share counts, all that is quantifying your value as a member of the social media community. So how does it affect boys and girls differently? If you want to trap a girl, what girls are most interested in is social information.
Yeah.
Girls have a very developed map of social space. They track who likes who said what about who.
Yeah.
Whereas males are literally a bit more autistic. Like literally, this is the work of Simon Baron-Cohen in the UK. The male brain, that's right. The male brain is a female, it starts off as a female brain in utero, and then testosterone shifts it over a little bit to be a little higher on systemizing, a little lower on empathizing. So boys, teenage boys, they're just not that interested in what so-and-so said about so-and-so.
No.
What boys really want to do is war and sex. They love war. They love watching war movies. They love watching violence, fighting, boxing,
playing
sports, shooter games. So boys, again, here, as you know, I'm very much both I love cultural psychology and anthropology, but also evolution. I think we can't understand unless we understand our hunter-gatherer origins. So the boys are attracted to war and to sex. They like looking at naked people much more than girls do.
Yeah, and just for our audience, this is on population level, right? I mean, there are always exceptions.
That's right.
And of course,
that's right. That's right. Right.
Yeah.
What's almost always the case in the social sciences is that the variance within each group is larger than the variance across groups.
Yeah, exactly.
But if we look on average at all boys versus all girls, Instagram is going to be much more attractive to girls, whereas pornography and video games are going to be much more attractive to boys, especially shooter games or team sports games. So that's the boys and girls begin to split and take different paths. Let's see where. I just want to finish tracing out what happened. 2009, 2010 is when it begins to get super viral, and this enables the Arab Spring to happen. And so that's 2011. And so we're still thinking, amazing. Social media is amazing.
Social media brings down dictators.
It's going to bring down dictators.
It mobilizes citizens in dictatorships. And,
that's right. So we're still techno-optimists. And what's happening, our kids are now spending 5, 7, 10 hours a day.
That was 2010?
I don't know the exact number of hours per day back then. By 2018, half of our kids said that they were online almost all the time. So it goes gradual. I don't know the exact curve, but it goes up. So the point is we're still techno-optimists, and our kids are now online all the time, and we're thinking, maybe this is good. Like, okay, they're going to really learn this technology. Oh, digital natives. We said, they're digital natives. Oh boy, are they going to be smart. They're going to be like Superman.
I remember that.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so that's what we thought all the way through 2012, 2013, 2014. Okay. And then in the United States, the left first begins to turn when we see Donald Trump is elected because of Twitter. He never would have been president if not for Twitter. And also Facebook, the Facebook Analytica scandal. So now we're saying, wait a second, this social media stuff is really good for demagogues and political manipulation. It's amazing for Russian agents who want to mess with American democracy and other democracies. So 2017 is really the first time we're thinking, wait a second, what do we have here?
Also with the Brexit, of course.
And that's right, exactly. That's right, the Brexit. So now we're saying, wait a second. Look, democracy has always been tenuous, unstable. Plato said so, the ancient Greeks said so, the American founding fathers who read about democracy, they knew that it's fragile, it's easily destroyed, you have to really get things set, you have to get the right settings. So by 2017, 2018, we're beginning to turn and realize, wait a second, what have we done? And our kids, and now we're seeing the depression and the anxiety. As I said, 2014, colleges are flooded with anxious kids. So 2017, 2018, we're beginning to think, wait a second, maybe this is not good for kids to be on social media all the time, scrolling, posting, worrying about what everyone says, counting. Maybe it's not good. And Jean Twenge, a social psychologist in California, writes the first article in book. She writes an article in The Atlantic with the headline, Is Our Smartphones Destroying a Generation? And a lot of psychologists criticized her that you don't have evidence, it's just a correlation. But that's when I got interested in it, around then. And by 2019, Jean and I had provided a lot of evidence that, wait a second, the kids really are depressed, and we think we can show it's caused by social media. So we're beginning to make progress in 2019, and then boom, COVID hits, and what happens? Kids are online all day long. All day long. All kids are on all day long. I mean, it was horrible what we did to them.
Schools were closed.
Schools were closed, that's right.
Yeah, in hindsight, you would say, of course, but there's always in hindsight, that it's not rocket science to see that it's not good for children to be online so much and constantly putting themselves out to be evaluated. And
intuitively, that's true, of course. But I remember
now we would say, but back then, I must say we didn't really think about it.
Not back then, but even last year when we made the podcast about your book, Jonathan, even then the response was of some researchers, of people who said it's correlation. Of course.
Let's talk about that.
On your book.
Please grill me on that.
What I find mind-blowing in your book are these graphs, you know, these hockey stick type of graphs. Also about depression, about suicide rate, I think.
All going up around 2011.
Self-harm. They're all a sudden increase on all these aspects. And of course, your point is it's because of social media, it's because of the smartphones. But some critics say that's correlation, that's not causation. Maybe it's coincidence. What is your number one argument to counter that?
Well, let me give you three or so. So the first is that pointing to graphs that all go up at 2012, that is a correlational argument. It's true. That's what I started the book with, was that. In chapter 1, I show that. Yeah. And many of my critics say, oh, well, lots of things happened. In the United States, we had the Newtown massacre. That is, it was a guy who killed 26 5-year-olds in a school in Connecticut. And ever since then, our students have had these lockdown drills where they prepare for a shooter. And so people say, of course the kids are anxious. They have to do these. Yeah. So it could be anything. It doesn't have to be. So it could
financial
be anything.
Crisis, perhaps. Yeah.
But wait. But then. Yeah. But why did that cause girls in Australia, Canada, Scandinavia to start cutting themselves?
I see.
It doesn't make any sense. No. So even if we just stick with the correlational arguments, you still have to come up with an alternate explanation. No one has offered an alternate explanation. No one has suggested a reason why all around the developed world it happens around 2012 to 2014. So that's the first thing. Even just the historical correlation is a kind of an argument if there's no alternative. So that's the first. The second is that in psychology, we say, okay, correlational studies are helpful for suggesting a hypothesis, but then you need an experiment with random assignment, an RCT. That gives us much more solid knowledge of causation. And there are about 25 such experiments. Okay. Now, what we really need is 1,000 kids are randomly assigned at age 10 to get a smartphone and social media, and another 1,000 kids are, so that of course will never happen. No. That would never happen. So we have these experiments that just pick up a little bit of the story. It's like we're trying to glimpse this thing in a dark box. And the standard experiment is you ask mostly college students, you assign them to reduce their social media usage down to, say, an hour a day, from 3 or 4 hours down to an hour a day. And then you see whether they get happier or less, or more anxious or less. And there are about 25 of these experiments. And guess what? The ones that go for 1 day don't make people happy. If you've got a habit, if you've got an addiction, a compulsion, and you're separated from your phone, you don't get happy. You get anxious. It takes a week or two to overcome, especially for the heavy users. And so, but if you look at the ones that go for longer than a week and that measure anxiety and depression, almost all of them, or overall, they find a drop. So this is experimental evidence. Okay. Now, if you combine them all together, including the 1 day, then it looks weaker. But if you look at the ones that got them off for more than a week. So we have correlational evidence of all sorts. We have experimental evidence. But here's the most important point I want to make. The whole debate between me and my critics has been about these studies of screen time, of hours per day. All we have is how many hours a day do you spend on social media? Or how many hours a day do you spend on screens? This is a terrible variable. This is as if in nutrition science, suppose everything we know about nutrition, all we had was the variable, how many pounds of food did you eat yesterday? Oh, I ate 3 pounds. You ate 4 pounds? Okay, let's see. What's the difference? Like, that's insane. But that's what all that published research is on, is just this one question. How many hours a day? That's it.
You have to be specific.
Regardless of whether you eat chocolate or bread.
Exactly. That's right. We don't, in almost all the studies, we don't even know if they're on Snapchat, Instagram, or Facebook, or whatever. And the platforms have different profiles. But even still, we find the correlations and we find the experimental effect. Okay. But there is so much evidence outside. In fact, today, in fact, in a few hours, from when we're recording, my group is going to release a Substack post, a blog post, titled Snapchat is Harming Children at an Industrial Scale. And we've already done one for TikTok. And so here's a third kind of evidence. Confessions by the perpetrators of what they're doing to kids. They know what they're doing. They talked about it internally. They have internal studies. And because
the perpetrators, the designers.
The big tech companies. That's right. The big tech companies. That's right. I mean, we should have known. The fact that they don't let their kids use this technology should have been a clue to us that, well, maybe they know something we don't. Well, guess what? Thousands and thousands of families are suing Meta, Snap, and TikTok because their kids are dead. And or severely damaged, or perpetual eating disorders, or drug overdoses. Some of them survived and are crippled. So, because of all these lawsuits, the lawyers can do some discovery. They can request some documents, some internal correspondence. So we have a lot of internal memos from these companies, and the way they talk about it, they know that they are not just fostering addiction, their goal is to maximize engagement. And over again, we see somebody, because look, these companies are full of good people who don't want to hurt kids. And they'll say, wait a second, Snapchat gets 10,000 reports of sextortion every month. At least this is what was reported in 2021. And so some of them are concerned about that. But it's clear from the transcripts that the leadership says maximize engagement no matter what. Maximize engagement.
Sounds like the tobacco industry in the 1960s and 70s.
Exactly. This is the big tobacco, except it's much more addictive in that with tobacco, if you were smoking, you didn't have to smoke.
No.
It was never the case that most kids smoked in the United States. I don't know about Europe, maybe in France it was.
Kids? No.
But in let's say like around age 14 or 15, it was never the case that most kids smoked.
No.
But with social media, if a third of the kids are on it, well, then you have to be on it. And if 90% of the kids are on it, well, my God, you are a complete outcast if you're not on it. So this is big tobacco. They're using the same strategies that tobacco did. They're funding all kinds of research centers. They're trying to control the narrative. So, just to sum, I'm sorry, I'm so enthusiastic about this. But just to sum up, I'm just frustrated because there is a reasonable, normal academic debate about the academic evidence, and we do have to hash that out. But there's so much evidence outside of the academic publications when the companies themselves say what they're doing.
And even the kids themselves.
That's right, another kind of evidence. That's right. If you have eyewitness testimony from the victims, it's like, who hit you over the head with a stick? He did. And but
we'll wait for the report.
We'll wait for the report. Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah. That's important. You mentioned your Substack, which is called
Afterbabel.com. Yes. Like Babel, the Tower of Babel. Yes.
Yeah. You use that as a metaphor.
I love that metaphor.
Why?
My research originally was not on teen mental health. It's on morality and moral psychology and politics. And my interest in social media has been, before this book, it was much more on what social media is doing to democracy. And I had the sense that something changed in the universe around 2014, 2015. Something got weird. Yeah. And I've been trying to figure that out ever since. And I think it is what I just said to you guys. It's like it's the arrival of the super viral stuff affecting democracy. But I've been trying to figure it out ever since. And if you've talked about my books in the past, you know that I love metaphors, and I work hard to what's the right metaphor, and then
the
that really
is the rider.
Yes, the elephant in the rider.
Mind,
And so I've been using a variety of metaphors to try to convey, because what's happening to us is beyond our ability to understand. Our brains are very good at certain kinds of thinking, and they're not good at other kinds of thinking. And so I always look for a metaphor, which is so it's something, if there's something that's the source domain, and then you're trying to use it to illuminate a mystery, which is the target domain of the metaphor. So the target domain is democracy, what's happening to democracy. So now what's the source domain? What's a metaphor that will help us understand? And I can't remember when, at some point, 2021 or something, I can't remember why, but I looked back at the story of the Tower of Babel, and obviously you know what happens. Does God knock over the tower?
Well, no, he gives a lot of languages.
Exactly.
Creates confusion.
Exactly. That's right. So most of us who are not religious or don't read the Bible, we think, oh yeah, humans were all uppity and arrogant, so God knocked over the tower. But when you look at the text, that's not what happens. When you look at the text, there's this key line. It's a very, very short story, and there's this key line. So God says, behold the humans, and they will become like us. And so here's the key line. Let us go down and confound their language so that they may not understand one another. So that's what God does at Babel. And that, I think, is what social media did. The internet connected us, but social media fragments us into a billion communities of meaning that are ever shifting.
That's a sort of a theme in your work, I suppose. The Righteous Mind basically says we have different moral foundations. That's probably a reason why we don't really understand each other. We work very hard on it. And then social media came along and just blew it all away.
Exactly. We thought social media was going to be helpful, but it turns out social media is poison for democracy. And let me just to be clear, the kind of social media that we now have that maximizes engagement at all cost, that has a business model based on advertising, that kind of social media, I believe, is incompatible with liberal democracy.
Okay.
Maybe we can talk about democracy a little bit later. I wanted to talk about religion because that's also playing...
Because that's what we do.
That's what we do. And it plays a big role, actually, in your...
In all of my writing, that's right.
Yeah.
It does.
And also when it comes to smartphones and social media, basically you say in your book that religious people are a little bit better protected
that's right.
against the harm of smartphones and social media.
Right. Yeah, that's
How
right.
does that work?
Yeah. So let me start with the big picture, which is my favorite thinker in human history is Emile Durkheim. Okay, Emile Durkheim and Charles Darwin. And I always put them together. But Durkheim taught us to understand religion not as a set of beliefs, but as a means of creating a moral community. And we enact it when we come together. We have rituals. And so, the new atheist who accepts that, look, this is false. Oh, this is false. This makes no... Like
absurd beliefs.
That misses the point. That misses the point of what religion is. Religion is not about figuring out the universe or giving us comfort because we're going to die.
12 arguments for the existence of God.
Yeah, that's right. It's none of that. I mean, that's, let philosophers debate that, but that's not where the action is. As a psychologist, what I care about is how religion changes groups and makes possible the beginnings of human society. And in The Righteous Mind, the subtitle is Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. And I spent a lot of time looking at the evolution of human sociality, the origin of our ability to make something sacred. Then we circle around the sacred thing, often literally circling around it. That's what feels the best. And then we can trust each other and we can do things together. And we've created a moral matrix, a moral network, and then we can live in the network. That's the way it's always been. Now, you get large-scale societies. How do you have a shared moral matrix over everyone? Well, that's really hard. And if you have good media, that is, if you have media that's linked to the truth, that has editors, that has some responsibility to the truth, and it's widely seen, well, then you can have shared understandings in a very large group. But it turns out that's very fragile. And as we said before, social media can shred that. Okay, so now back to your question about religion. Durkheim gives us the word anomie, or normlessness. And when you don't have a sense of shared norms, when there's no moral matrix, people are lost. They're not free. It's like, hey, I can do whatever I want. They are disoriented. They can't find any sense of meaning. And so I'll tell you, so let's focus now on the most powerful graph in the whole book, I think. It's the graph of, there's a survey that we've given to American high school students since the 1970s. It's called the Monitoring the Future study. One of the questions on that is they have a bunch of statements, and the question is, how much do you agree with this? One of the statements is, my life feels useless. Or sometimes I think I'm no good at all. There's a few others that are similarly haunting. And what we see, and then the question is, what percentage of American 18-year-olds say, I strongly agree with this, or I moderately agree with this? What percent agree? The answer is 9%. 9% from, I think that question was added in the 1990s. So from the 1990s through 2010, 2011, it's 9%. Okay. It goes up, it just fluctuates a little bit, but it's amazingly stable. And then all of a sudden, 2012, 2013, it starts shooting up and it doubles within about 7 years. It doubles. It's now around, by 2019, before COVID, it was something on the order of 20%.
Yeah.
And this is a stunning loss of a sense of meaning or purpose.
Anomie,
that's right. This is anomie. That's right. Okay, so now let's break down the data. So a lot of this research was done by my research partner, Zach Rausch. And so Zach has mastered these data sets, and we would say, like, well, okay, who's hit harder, who's not? And the answer is, the biggest effect is actually, there's a question on the survey, religion is important to my family. And the people who agree with that, who say, moderately agree or strongly, those people, they only go up a little. On all these measures of depression, worthlessness, they go up a little, so they're protected.
Protective layers there.
That's right. Saying if religion is important to your family, that means at home you have a moral matrix, and there are obligations. And no, you can't go out. You need to visit your grandmother and do your chores.
Yeah.
So religious families and also conservative families. Political conservatism turns out to also be protective. And as I talked about in The Righteous Mind, the big difference is that conservative moralities are more binding. They lock you in. And I give a very Durkheimian interpretation.
Loyalty, sanctity, authority.
Exactly. Well, that's it. Loyalty, sanctity, and authority. Those are about group binding. Yeah. So let's imagine millions of kids. And it's long been the case that conservatives are a little happier than liberals, and that religious families are a little happier than, so that's long been the case. But now you get to 2012, everyone goes on social media. Guess what? the religious kids are less on social media. The conservative kids are less on social media. Their parents put more restrictions, so their parents protect them more. Yeah. Whereas progressive families, it's more like, hey, do what you want, and hey, it's
it's your right. Yeah,
it's your right. That's right. You have digital rights, is what some of them say. So it's those kids who got washed away. It's the secular liberal kids got washed out to sea, lost all sense of meaning, drowning in anime, and that's been happening since 2012.
So basically, when everything is going up and bright and shining, the conservatives are a bit of a block in the road. And now when things are not going as well, the conservatives sort of, are best protected.
That's right.
Because they don't go along so quickly with new developments.
That's right. We made a civilizational mistake in embracing this technology for children. Yes, it makes it easier for adults to do things, but it was a civilizational mistake to say, instead of making friends and going out to play, why don't you just sit online all the time and post and like people's posts?
You're saying that religious people and conservative people, they find it easier to say that's wrong. You don't, you can't do that.
That's right.
A lot of religious people would disagree, I'm afraid, nowadays.
What do you mean?
No, I mean, I hear a lot of Christian parents who say, I struggle with this as well.
Oh, yes, everyone's struggling with it. But the Christian families are doing, or the religious families, I should say, are doing more to limit it.
Yeah, I suppose they see more, they perhaps have a better view that this is a problem.
They're
in the first place. Yeah.
Less affected. I
guess at least they see the problem.
That's right. Yeah. So if you go back to, let's say, rock music lyrics or rap music lyrics in the 1980s and 90s, it was the conservatives who were saying, we've got to ban these lyrics or warn, kids should not be exposed to this garbage.
Yeah.
And people on the progressive said, you guys are all, old fashioned, like, you're prudes, like, let the kids listen what they want.
Computer games, same thing.
And that's right. Yeah. So conservatives have always tried harder to control the development of their children, what comes in, especially religious families. And in the United States, we were almost founded by separatist religious communities. I mean, why did Dutch people... Dutch people came to America to make money, I suppose, in New York.
That's what we always do.
Some of them consider themselves persecuted minorities in the 19th century.
That's true. Anyway, so we have much more a tradition. Yeah. I'd like to ask you guys a question. My sense is that Holland is one of the least religious places in the West.
That's true, yeah.
Depends where you are, but generally, yes.
Yeah. And the first time I came to Holland, when I was 21, I did this typical American teen trip across Europe. I got a Euro pass, and I started in London. I went across Europe, and I had a wonderful time in Amsterdam. And I went out to visit a friend of my father's out on a farm somewhere, I forget what town, in this countryside. And I stopped into a church, and I was talking with a man there, and I was trying to understand like religion in Holland. And this was 1985.
Okay.
And he basically said like, no, religion is dead. People don't come here anymore. There was a sense even then that Holland was secularizing very, very fast. Tell me, what do you perceive?
Just two things there. I mean, when you go to Amsterdam or the areas around Amsterdam, that's deeply secular, true. There's also a well-developed Bible Belt in the Netherlands where you actually can find towns and villages where quite a lot of people still go to church, and even young people.
Oh,
and then the peculiar thing about the Netherlands is there's not much church membership, maybe, or membership of a mosque, let's say 30% or so. But those who are members tend to go quite a lot.
Okay.
So different from the rest of Europe, where there's much more nominal, so to speak, membership. So the Dutch are either in or out, basically.
And we're talking about Protestants here, or is this true of the Catholics too?
That's mostly a Protestant phenomenon, although nominally the Netherlands would have more Catholics than Protestants. The Protestants are more church-going and more active.
I see.
But
I mean, if we went back 50 years,
it
would be much more Protestant. You're saying the population is Protestant heritage, but because the Catholics still go to church or identify as Catholic, that's why you're telling me that there are more Catholics than Protestants in the Netherlands?
In terms of membership,
right,
self-definition, or cultural Christianity, or whatever you call it, but especially in the south of the country.
Right, so makes sense.
Above the rivers, so the north, where we are here, it's more Protestant.
Okay.
This is a very large canvas, but anyways.
But it's one of the most secular countries in the world, I think. And that's what we're also exploring in this podcast, the secularization of Holland and other Western parts of the world. And it struck me what you write in your book and what you just explained, that for religious people, they're a little bit more accustomed to saying you can't do that.
Right.
They're more accustomed to rules.
There is a moral order in the world that we have to respect, even if we don't understand it.
But is it also a problem right now, maybe when it comes to smartphones and social media, that as parents we find it more hard to say, that's just wrong, you don't do that.
Oh my goodness.
It's almost like language like sinful is also out of the window, I guess, but it's pretty much considered sinful to limit someone else and say, you can't do that.
Yeah, we love our liberty.
Is that a problem?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been an extraordinary decline of authority in the West. It used to be that teachers, police, presidents, that people were treated with respect, and we would use different titles, and we would dress properly to meet with them. But there's been a tremendous decline of authority in the West. Of course, most spectacularly in the 1960s, when there was a kind of a cultural revolt against authority, and this is, I think, a tension that I explored in the Righteous Mind. An effective, a dynamic system is not one that is just like stable and this is the way it is. A dynamic system requires a force pushing one way and a force pushing the other. And that way you can adapt to changing circumstance. And our bodies are actually like that. The sympathetic and parasympathetic systems will push up or down. And the progressive instinct in every society of some people are high on openness to experience, interested in change, they question traditions, and that's valuable. Mm-hmm. And so you can think of them, they're the gas pedal, and they sort of push things forward. And then you always have some people who say, wait, not so fast. Let's respect our ancestors. And they were, an Australian conservative politician told me once, said the definition of a conservative is a man who doesn't automatically think his grandfather was an idiot. And so the conservatives play the role of the brake in a society. When you have the proper fluctuation between gas pedal and brake, you get progress, but not crazy driving off a cliff.
Yeah, you somewhere in the Righteous Mind you say conservatives generally have a let's say better understanding of moral capital.
Yeah, yes,
the kind of things you tend to lose when groups dissolve, when people find individual liberty, then certain things disappear that you start to miss when they're gone.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So all of that. So conservatives have a much better sense of the necessity of authority, even in times when you don't understand. Now, obviously, authority abuses its power. Authority has to be kept in check, and all of that. So that's why you need the healthy balance. But I think in the modern world, conservatives have been and religious people have been sort of like declining in their influence. And when you have entire institutions completely devoid of any conservative religious sentiment, like American universities or like the country of Holland, perhaps, I don't know. But, Holland doesn't seem crazy. But you get incredibly terrible policies that then backfire and push everyone to the right and re-elect Donald Trump. That's what happened in the United States.
Yeah, that's certainly a risk.
As a social psychologist, you thought about religion a lot. Would you say religion is generally good for your health, for your psychological health?
So first of all, yes. So first of all, religion is about group bonding, a certain kind of tribalism. Religion can motivate with that groupishness. It can motivate atrocities, wars, genocide, forced conversion. Yeah. So I don't want to say anything about religion per se. No. At the other extreme, it's been wondered, why is America more religious than Europe? And one theory, which I think is true, is that we have better religions than you do. What I mean by that is that we have always had a free market in religion.
Okay.
So it's always been the case, and especially among Protestants, but even between Protestant and Catholic, especially among Protestant denominations, if this church isn't super interesting, if this doesn't grip me, I'll just go next door to the other one. Sure. And everyone's innovating, and some are using electric guitars and loud music. So we've got this free market in religion, and everyone's competing.
But that's a good thing, you would say?
Well, it certainly keeps the religions fresh and appealing.
Also breeds a lot of craziness.
It could. In theory, it could. That's true. But
the whole thing with social media, so it needs to be more extreme, more stimuli to get people in, playing in their anxieties and all the kind of stuff the dark stuff.
Okay, yes, there is the rise of Christian nationalism in America now, which I don't know a lot about, but that is sort of like, views about, American greatness and kick out the immigrants. And I don't know much about Christian nationalism, but that seems to be a sort of of course, it's always debated, was Jesus a liberal or conservative? And, the Bible gives you
depends who you're talking to.
That's right. That's right. But so social media, I think, allows a kind of Christianity. And also, there are extremes in Judaism and Hinduism. So it allows the extreme elements to sort of magnify and isolate. So, but I'm speaking beyond what I know here. In response to your general question, is religion good for our health? I would say religions in the West, which are fairly open and not compulsory, and you can choose. Religions in the West, to be part of a religious community versus not part of a religious community, we've known for 40 or 50 years that people in a religious community are healthier and happier.
Yeah.
Research on happiness really took off in the 1990s with positive psychology. And the two big findings, when you look at happiness data, it's religion and marriage. Those are the two big things. If you're religious and or married, you're probably substantially happier on average than people who are not. And that is even more true today.
It even trumps health or something like that?
On health, I don't know the data there as well, but I would imagine so obviously social class has a huge role on health, at least in the United States. Rich people take care of their health. They don't eat junk food, and working class people, lower SES, are much heavier, much more obese, eat a lot more junk food. So there are all kinds of confounds here. But in terms of depression, in terms of mental health, I think it's fair to say that being part of a religious community is protective of your mental health.
Okay.
Jonathan, you're an American, of course. And in our podcast, for the last few weeks, we talked a lot about America.
I'm sorry.
You don't have to be. But it's just the fact that many Dutch, many European people, they feel like they're losing a friend or an ally. It feels like America is turning its back on us, or maybe even its back on democracy itself.
That's right.
How do you experience it?
Oh, exactly the same way. So what people have to understand is that the United States was carefully designed to prevent what just happened.
Yeah.
The founding fathers created a structure. They knew, they were rebelling against kings, and the whole idea was this great experiment in self-governance. Can we govern ourselves? And they knew that if one person has all the power, power corrupts. And so they divided power, and the key division was the Congress was the first branch of government. It's Article 1 of the Constitution. They clearly are, that is the government, or at least that is the thing that makes policy. And then the executive branch is supposed to execute the policy while also playing the lead in international affairs, things like that. So we had this division of powers.
Checks and balances.
That's right. And it worked for a long time.
Yeah.
And then it stopped working because of our polarization. So polarization, it doesn't mean that people are different on issues. What we're talking about here is what's called affective polarization. To the degree to which left and right disagree, that's fine, that's healthy. To the degree to which left and right hate each other and see the other as the mortal enemy, and if they win, the country is over, and you hear on the rhetoric on both sides. If they win, this will be the last election. There will not be any more elections because they will take power. Yeah. Well, once you get into that polarized mindset, that Manichaean good versus evil mindset, then in order to beat them, anything is justified. You can break the law, you can violate the Constitution, and the tragic failure is that while Donald Trump is doing extraordinarily unconstitutional things, he's not supposed to have this much power to decide everything. And what's supposed to happen is Congress or the courts are supposed to check him. Yeah. And because of our polarization, it's not Congress versus the executive branch. It's red versus blue in Congress, red versus blue in the Supreme Court, red versus blue at other levels. And when the red team controls everything, then the red team can do whatever the hell it wants. And this one man who is a narcissist, who has a bizarre view of everything, that everything is a battle, a zero-sum game, he is able to impose his will. And the most horrific thing that I have ever seen in my life as an American was that event in the White House where Trump and Vance attacked Zelensky. And then cut off intelligence help to Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, what is happening here?
Accuse him of starting the war and all that.
Yes.
Just recently.
So that's right.
Yeah.
So I think we are over a cliff in the United States, and this is extremely dangerous for the world because we are such a powerful country. And if we go rogue, if we become just another, like Russia or China, well, China has some controls, but if we become like Russia and become predatory and start invading Greenland, believe me, most Americans are horrified
Most of my American
by
friends,
this.
they
can't
feel
believe
embarrassed
this.
about that.
Yeah.
But is there a way back from that? I mean,
I don't know.
People could start reading, I suppose, The Righteous Mind, but probably they've done that already. And still, so is there a way back? I'm not saying to decent government, but at least to a bit of less polarization. What should people do?
I don't see a way back to less polarization.
No,
and that's the
horrible.
title of my next book. The one I was supposed to write for this one, the title is Life After Babel, Adapting to a World We May Never Again Share.
I see.
So I don't see a way back from the polarization. I think 10, 20 years from now, it could be much, much worse. But there is a way back from Trump in that his policies are so insane and so likely to crash the economy. I mean, cutting off trade?
Cutting it off, not cutting it off, cutting it off again.
That's right. Nobody can plan for it.
I'm just curious. Do you look at maybe Trump or maybe what happened at the Oval Office with Zelensky and that whole situation? Do you look at it also with the glasses on of a psychologist?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah?
I do.
And what do you see?
Oh, I mean, so look, in 2017, I gave a talk arguing that American democracy is now outside the parameter settings of sustainability. That is, it's very hard to have a liberal democracy. You can have a small, homogeneous country, like the Scandinavians, or to some extent Holland. You can have a small, homogeneous country which has a lot of moral capital, a lot of binding. And I think it's the case that in Holland, it was the fight against the Spanish and the fight against the sea that gave you this incredible social capital in the 17th century.
It helps. Yeah.
So you can do that at the small scale, but to have a large, diverse, secular democracy, what holds it together?
Yeah.
Very little. And in America, we had the American civil religion. We had the worship of the Founding Fathers, of the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. Those were our holy documents. But that's tenuous. And diversity, if you have immigration without assimilation, you get much more centrifugal force, blowing us outwards. Whereas what happened with my grandparents' generation, they came from Russia and Poland around 1905, and that was the great wave of European immigration. That was they were funneled through the public schools. They became Americans. They watched American TV later on. So you can hold it together. But I began arguing in 2017 that all of the centripetal force, the force that pull us inward and give us moral capital, they're all weakening. Loss of a foreign enemy, Russia, Soviet Union, rising immigration without assimilation, the loss of a coherent media system with guardrails. Now we have nonsense proliferating everywhere. Yeah. So I began to worry that we are outside the parameters of sustainability in 2017. And things are much worse now. And this is why I'm so afraid of AI, because AI blows us even further out. So I'm very alarmed about the future of my country in particular. I think these threats, these issues may affect many other democracies, but I think the American democracy is uniquely vulnerable.
And is there still some time to do something against big tech? In that case, AI and all that? I mean, you wouldn't write probably if you didn't have any hopes for that.
Yeah. So I think there's very little hope of doing anything legislatively in the United States.
Yeah.
That's always been hard just because the way our Congress is set up, you can buy influence for very little money. We've got a garage sale going on. Anyone can buy influence in the U.S. Congress, just give them money. I mean, it's not a personal bribe, but it's to their campaign.
I know, yeah.
And so that's always been a problem. And then once, my book came out, before Donald Trump was reelected and before he brought up Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and everyone on the stage for his inauguration. Yeah. So I think the chance of congressional action to rein in big tech is very close to zero. But what we're doing in this movement to roll back the phone-based childhood, we're still working on, there's one bill in Congress that does some nice things that, who knows, it might pass. But what we're focused on is the 50 states and the EU and Australia and the UK.
Yeah.
All of these jurisdictions are not controlled by Meta in the same way that the US is.
Well, your book is having tremendous impact. I guess we can say that because there's a lot of awareness. Maybe there's awareness on the policy level, on the government level, but also on the parenting level.
Yeah, that's right.
Yesterday, I received a WhatsApp message from the school, someone from the school.
School of your children, right?
Yeah. And my son is 4 years old.
Okay.
But there's already parents texting each other. We gotta make the school
get a grip on this.
smartphone free.
Great.
And it wouldn't have happened without your book. I'm sure of that. I'm sure of that. So you see, maybe it's not on the government level. Maybe not in the United States. I think Europe is more open to those ideas and limiting big tech. But from the grassroots up, I guess you could say, on the parent level, something is changing very rapidly.
Absolutely. That's right. So these are companies that make their living by selling advertising and data. And top down, it would be nice to have more government regulation of certain elements of their business model. But bottom up, if we just stop feeding our children to them, they lose a lot of money, they lose a lot of power. If we have a general sense of disgust towards these companies, the way we do towards big tobacco, it's going to be harder for them to operate. It's going to be harder for them to recruit talent. It used to be that young people, smart kids coming out of college, like, oh, I got a job with Facebook. I got a job with Google. And that was so prestigious. But I think it's going to turn. And so it's going to feel like working for a tobacco company.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
So I think there's a lot we can do to change. It's a complicated social, economic, business environment. And there's a lot we can do even if we don't have a functioning U.S. Congress.
Last question. Maybe a bit of a practical question. For a lot of parents are listening. What do you recommend? What's good screen time? Or would you say there's no screen time at all?
Yeah. So thank you for that question. So here's something that I hope will be reassuring and helpful, because people focus on screens, and that's not the right thing to focus on. So let's approach it differently. I want to distinguish between two different uses of screen technologies. One is very good, and the other is very bad. One is story time. The other is fragmenting time. So story time is good. Humans are storytelling animals. We have always raised our children with stories. Since we've had language, we have raised our children in stories. This is why it's so important for children to read books, to read good literature, because you immerse yourself. It takes a while. You can't just get it from one page, but you spend weeks with a book. You immerse yourself in a long story. You can't wait to get back. I mean, the way the kids devoured Harry Potter novels, it was like an addiction, but it was healthy because they were just immersing themselves in multiple stories. And the stories have a moral world. There are questions of good and evil. So stories are good. And a television screen is a good way to present stories. And so if you have, your kid is 4. Yeah. So we're not sure when, first 3 years, keep them away from screens, keep them away from, TV. But, 4, 5, 6, I'm not sure exactly when. Sometime in there, it's fine to begin watching movies, ideally with your child. Right. And by the time they're 6 or 7, if you have 2 kids, let them sit there and watch a movie while you make dinner. That's great. And so, if they watch a couple of movies a week, they're learning to pay attention to a long story, which was written by adults, which has some sort of a moral universe. So story time is good. Don't be afraid of story time.
Much better than endless scrolling on YouTube by themselves.
Exactly.
On a
so let's go through the features of that. That's right. So people say scrolling, but I prefer to call it fragmenting time, because what happens when you give your kid an iPad or your old iPhone, a lot of it will be scrolling, but most of it's going to end up being short videos. But it can do 1,000 different things. So the kids will discover, oh, let me do this thing. And then if it gets a tiny bit boring, then they say, oh, let me do this thing. Yeah. And so what fragmenting time does is fragmenting time teaches you, let's say you're 6-year-old, fragmenting time teaches your child to be an exquisite judge of, is this the most gripping, interesting thing I could possibly be doing right now? I've been on this video for 20 seconds already and it's not. So let me try another one. Let me try another one.
Your brain is becoming a marketplace, basically.
That's right. Your brain, everything's an auction for the highest attentional interest. And that's what the companies want because they're competing to be maximally engaging, maximally hooking. And what that means is that by the time your child comes to New York University as my student, they can't read a book. No. My students say it's very hard for them to read a book. They're saying this all over the country, and I imagine you have it in Europe. And they're not reading many books. Yeah. And this is why I say culture is no longer being transmitted vertically. It's now coming in horizontally with little bits that are not moral stories, that don't teach you to pay attention, that don't have a moral lesson, and you're consuming them by yourself. Yeah. So parents, don't give your kids fragmenting time. Don't just hand them your iPhone or your iPad and say, here, play on it for the next hour while I cook dinner.
A longer moral movie is better. And of course, we've been, for this entire conversation, we've been mainly focusing on kids. But it's also, I think a lot of adults are listening that are thinking, this also
absolutely
is appropriate for me. I mean,
that's right. That's right.
My screen time, I just looked it up yesterday, is 4.5 hours.
On your phone. On your phone. And then more on your computer as well, I assume.
Yeah. A lot more on my computer. Yeah. So
what's happening? So since I wrote the book, as I said, I started focusing on mental illness, but then realized the attention fragmentation, the attentional damage is much greater even than the mental illness. And just in the last 6 months, we're getting some new data sets coming out and reporting that adults are getting stupider too. Yeah. So educational outcomes around the world are declining since 2012. Yeah. But there's a test. It was a European data set. I don't remember what it was called. But they actually give adults a couple of pages to read, and then you answer a question. Can you read this and answer a question about it? Adults are getting worse, not since COVID, since 2014. So yes, we're all getting stupider because we're losing the ability to attend. And if you don't have your attention, you can't do anything in the world.
Important work that you do. Thank you for your work and for you've been generous with your time.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you.
Jullie ook. Bedankt voor het kijken naar de Ongelooflijke. Ik ben heel benieuwd wat je van dit gesprek vond. Like de video ook vooral als je wil. En reageer ook even onder de video. Wat vond je ervan dat we überhaupt met een Engelstalige gast spraken? Is dat iets wat we vaker moeten doen? Lijkt me ook leuk om te horen. En komende zondag gewoon weer een reguliere Nederlandstalige Ongelooflijke podcast. Dus hopelijk tot dan.